I think Dickens was a very simple and a very sincere Christian. He had a great faith in the teachings of the New Testament.
It was much to do with love, it was much to do with service, it was much to do with good works. He had very, very severe criticism and often very satirical treatment to make of people who held to extremely narrow religious positions.
If you think of Mrs. Clenham in Bleak House with her very vengeful Christianity, you've got the complete contrast there.
The kind of people Dickens wanted to get at was those who went to church on Sunday but walked past starving children on the streets on their way home and didn't pay any attention to them. He did feel that a lot of organised religion had lost its way. It wasn't teaching the Bible, it wasn't teaching what he felt was the Christian message, which was to treat others as you'd have them treat you, or to help the poor and the meek.
In 1846, when he started to consider it important to give some kind of clear statement of religious teaching for his children, he wrote a work which later became known as The Life of Our Lord.
And it's a very, very sweet book. It's really lovely, actually. And when you read it, he's got little asides to his children saying things like, I think you've seen a camel, but if you haven't, let me know and I'll take you to see one because we have them at the zoo. And he explains what a locust is when he writes about the plague of locusts and things, and he talks about the Bible in general.
It does restate the teachings of Christ. It does restate the story of the Gospels, the good news message of the Gospel. These were things which were central to him and important for him to pass on to his children.
Everybody ought to know about it.
It wasn't published until 1934, and the reason being that Dickens didn't want anyone else to see it. This was just a private thing for him and his family, so it wasn't published until the last of Dickens's children had died.
You can never think what a good place heaven is without knowing who he was.
It gives an insight into Dickens's own religious beliefs, which was that kindness is the most important thing. He says to his children, when you are grown up, be kind to people. So it's a really nice way of looking at the Bible without making it really full of hellfire and brimstone, but looking at the good messages in there.
About the history of Jesus Christ.
Towards the end of his career, Dickens made almost 500 public readings of his work. He toured the length and breadth of Britain, as well as America. Wherever he went, audiences flocked to see him.
The performances were incredibly theatrical and dramatic and absolutely engaged his audiences in the passion and the excitement of the stories, which of course they all knew so well from the original novels. Dickens had loved the theatre from childhood. He adored the sense of, well, play acting. And as a young man, he really almost became an actor. He had an audition booked at the Covent Garden Theatre. He missed it. He was suffering from flu on the day. But was generally reckoned that if he had had that audition, that would have been his career as an actor. So really the readings enabled him to come back to that first love of his.
Gerald is now following in his great-great-grandfather's footsteps.
Don't be cross, uncle, said the nephew. What else can I be? Returned the uncle.
Somebody came to me with the idea of recreating one of the readings of A Christmas Carol. I started working through the script and putting all my own characters and voices and expressions into it. I was rather proud. I thought I'd done this rather well. And after I'd done it, I went and did a little bit of research into Dickens and found that I was just recreating exactly what he had done, with all the voices and the expressions and everything.
As the good old city knew.
He has created each and every one of his characters so precisely. And he would perform them first in a mirror to himself. And he would watch and he would listen to the character as it came back to him. And then he would go and write it down. Part of his success absolutely is that ability to include his readers in the scene. Suddenly he describes a scene and you are there. And if it's a winter scene, you're shivering. If it's a summer scene, you're hot. And even today, an image of Dickens' Christmas is a wonderful snowscape with carol singers and stagecoaches, and you're there right in the middle of the snow.
All of Dickens' novels engage with important social issues.
Dickens had a good deal of exposure to social inequality as a child. When he moved to London in the 1820s, very soon after their arrival, his family found themselves descending into an ever-worsening spiral of debt and difficulty, the consequence of which was that his father was sent to the Marshalsea prison.
He was living in London on his own for several months, walking along the streets of London, late at night on his way back from seeing his family at the prison. He would pass terrible scenes. London was a really frightening place. There was a lot of social deprivation, there was a lot of poverty, there was a lot of crime.
In order to supplement the family's difficulties with finance, he was found a job working at Warren's Blacking at Hungerford Stairs near the River Thames, pasting labels on pots of shoe blacking.
For a little boy who had dreamt of being a learned and distinguished man, it was the death of all his hopes, to become a little labouring hind with these common men and boys. He had a very, very unhappy time.
And I think this never quite left him. This was what really came into his fiction, his journalism, the fact that he wanted to do something about these people living in terrible circumstances.
Dickens's principal social concern was with the way in which society treats its children, because the children are the future.
He said, "I'm going to write a book that will deliver a hammer blow in favour of the poor man's child." What Dickens does a great deal with A Christmas Carol is to talk about how his readers should behave, and two of the most important characters are not only Scrooge and the ghosts who visit him, but two children named Ignorance and Want.
The spirit of Christmas Present says to Scrooge to beware them both. They're both frightening figures. But most of all, beware this boy. The boy is ignorance. Because if nothing is done to improve the prospects of the child, if nothing is done to educate the next generation, then the prospects facing all of us are alarming indeed.
But his main message was to get across to people that Christmas wasn't the only time of the year when people needed to be kind to the poor, but it was a very good start.